Okay, students, thanks so much for watching Part B of Stagecoach. I call it the Apache Wells part because of all the action takes place on the way to or in the Apache Wells stop on the stage. We can break this 30 minutes down into 4 segments. 6 minutes of travel inside the stagecoach, 10 minutes of before and after the birth of Mrs. Mallory's baby, 4 minutes of Dallas and Ringo talking privately, and then a 10-minute sequence of scenes in the morning. Now, each one of these 4 segments works to advance the story and to get us deeper into the characters and their relationships. They also display some excellent acting from the 3 lead characters and show us through lighting, staging, and camera shots how spectacularly director John Ford could tell a story. Today's talk has 2 parts. First, about social class and conflict in Stagecoach, and a second about 4 important moments in this 30-minute Apache Wells segment. So, part 1, class and conflict. We'll get to class in a moment. First, let's take a look at the conflicts between characters in this segment. First, we've got Curly and Buck. They're tired, they're scared, and they're friends, so they're not really angry with each other, but they do seem to be yelling at each other a lot, don't they? Next comes Mrs. Mallory and Dallas. Now, you can see Mrs. Mallory's not feeling well on the stagecoach, and Dallas is observing her very carefully and very kindly says, You can come sit next to me and put your head on my shoulder. And Mrs. Mallory's just icy cold. No, thank you. And a similar thing happens as soon as they get to the Apache Wells station. She says,
Mrs. Mallory, I'm awfully sorry. If there's anything I can...
Quite all right, thank you.
So cold. You know, Dallas is really working hard, but Mrs. Mallory's just not going to be friendly. We see yet another example of Dallas's extreme kindness and toward this situation as a whole. I mean, she's acting as the only woman on behalf of the group. Here she is selflessly taking care of Mrs. Mallory, and we find out that Dallas stayed up all night long. It was nice holding a baby, she says. Even after the baby is born, Dallas feels a responsibility to stay with the group and help. Next, in the part where they're traveling in the stagecoach, there's a delightful bit of comedy going on here. There's this action between Peacock and Doc, where Doc is so drunk, he's, playing with Peacock's hat and his scarf, and he's babying him. And it's just, very foolish, drunken behavior. And at the same time, a different kind of comedy is going on here. Here's Gatewood, who's just so loud, talking at the top of his lungs like that. And poor Mrs. Mallory, look at Mrs. Mallory's face. She's like, how can I escape this guy who's so urusai? We got to ask the question, what is this banker talking about, and why does he talk so much? Well, Gatewood holds a high position in polite society because he owns a bank, and bankers are rich. In the 1880s, at the time of this story, bankers would have been treated with the respect, they deserve. But remember, this movie was made for audiences of 1939. And in America, in the 1930s, people didn't like bankers. They didn't trust bankers. In the 1930s, America endured the Great Depression, and in that time, nearly half of the country's banks failed. So the image of the time was that bankers were greedy and cold-hearted. 25% of the population had no jobs in the 1930s, so people couldn't pay rent, and they were thrown out of their apartments, or they couldn't pay their mortgage, and they lost their homes. Director John Ford made sure to make the Gatewood character as unlikable as possible. In fact, Gatewood has no positive quality whatsoever. And it's not just that he talks so much, but it's specifically what he says that's so annoying. Let's get a specific example here. I don't know what the government is coming to. It pokes its nose into business. They're talking about bank examiners. So what Gatewood is talking about is bank regulators are bad. Regulation is bad. The government must not interfere with business. Now, this is the typical talk that you heard from rich people 100 years ago in America. And conservatives in America, even today, say exactly the same thing. Well, John Ford, the director, didn't like these kinds of people. He believed that people who talked like this were just wrong. Regulation of business is necessary, or else corporations would do anything they want to do to make money. If the government doesn't have any rules on corporations, corporations could put dangerous things into their products. What this country needs is a businessman for president. And, nobody believes this. 80 years later, Gatewood would get his wish when Donald Trump becomes president of the United States. And of course, Trump was a horrible person and not a good president. Look at Peacock's face. That is just so funny. He's like, how much of this do I have to endure from Doc? Doc Boone is really going to take the wind out of him by saying, what this country needs is more fuddle. Needs more alcohol, right? He says, you're drunk!
I'm happy, Gatewood. Woo.
So, two sources of comedy are coming in here. We've got Gatewood, who is just so urursai, and nobody likes him, and that's funny. And then we've got Doc Boone and Peacock, and their little silent comedy routine. Finally, I want to talk about Doc Boone and Hatfield, the gambler. In the previous segment, there was some dialogue exchanged between Doc and Hatfield that revealed that Doc was a soldier for the North, the Union Army, in the Civil War, while Hatfield was a soldier for the South, the Confederate Army.
I'd just been honorably discharged from the Union Army after the War of the Rebellion.
He calls it the War of the Rebellion against the United States. And Hatfield, a proud Southerner,
You mean the war for the Southern Confederacy, sir?
says, oh, it was the war for our independence, for the Southern Confederacy. And Doc Boone shuts him down pretty quickly.
I mean nothing of the kind, sir.
Here we've got some tension between a Northerner and a Southerner. And this continues a little further on when they're having lunch together, when Doc Boone mentions Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln was president during the Civil War, and it was Lincoln and the Union Army that won the war against the South.
During the late war, when I had the honor to serve the Union under our great president, Abraham Lincoln.
So, of course, Hatfield's going to make this kind of annoyed expression at the mention of President Lincoln. There are people, even to this day in the South, there are Southerners who hate Lincoln. Now, I mention this because in the first 30 minutes of the movie, we see many examples of conflict between Hatfield and Doc Boone. In this segment, Part B of Stagecoach, we're going to see the conflict between Doc and Hatfield begin to disappear. So, the class conflict, Stagecoach's 9 characters, can pretty much be sorted into 3 groups. There's polite society people. Whether we like them or not, the polite society people include Gatewood, Mrs. Mallory, Hatfield, and Peacock. Then there are the regular working class people who take the tough jobs, Curly the marshal and Buck the driver. And the people who are outcasts in society, Ringo the outlaw, Dallas the whore, and Doc the drunk. With these class distinctions, John Ford creates a microcosm, a slice of society that must endure hardships together. Sometimes they don't get along, and sometimes they come together as one, just like the rest of humanity. They're on a journey. In this middle segment, the Apache Wells segment, Ford makes it absolutely clear that he finds fault in the manners of polite society, and he sympathizes with the social outcast class. Because he's such a good filmmaker, so good at revealing his characters, we sympathize with Dallas, Ringo, and Doc the most. Okay, part 2 of my talk. I want to especially focus on 4 key moments in this part B of Stagecoach. These are moments or collections of actions, and let's call them, number 1, the birth, number 2, the romance story, number 3, Dallas's conflict, and number 4, Doc's redemption. Let's start with number 1. The birth of Mrs. Mallory's baby is a tremendous event. About 10 minutes of screen time of the movie is dedicated to Mrs. Mallory and how she's feeling and the baby, all the way up until Doc Boone finishes with the delivery. Now, this is a unifying moment for the Stagecoach members. Dallas takes charge by ordering the men to go and get hot water, and you do this and you do that, and Doc, you have to get ready. And we're reminded of how much Hatfield dislikes Doc.
A fine member of the medical profession.
Drunken beast.
Drunken beast.
And this is Doc's big moment. This scene lends a great deal of comedy to a very tense situation. Ringo and the Marshal, Curly, are working so hard to get Doc sober enough so that he can deliver the baby. And this is a really rigorous kind of thing. You know, drink coffee, throw up, splash my face with water, and so on. Again. And that continues. Hatfield jumps in and yells,
Isn't that drunken swine forward it?
Swine means pig. A baby's here. He's going to put out his cigarette because you don't smoke around a new baby. Everybody knows that. Now, take a look at Hatfield's face, the range of emotion. He suddenly becomes kind and a little bit warm and human when he's looking at the baby. Blinks his eyes. Take a look again. Softening of the face. He's suddenly not stern. So, I mean, that's very nice acting from John Carradine. But then he catches himself in just a moment when he suddenly says,
How's Mrs. Mallory?
He's going to be a real man again. So we see that even the notorious gambler can show that he's human. This part of the segment is a beautiful gathering of these people who usually don't get along and don't like each other. Everybody can agree to unite for just a moment to enjoy the miracle of birth. And look at Dallas's face. I mean, she's just beaming. Claire Trevor, the actress who played Dallas, usually played really tough, hard women. And look how soft and gentle and maternal she looks in this scene.
It's a little girl.
With a giggle. Right? But notice, everyone's looking at the baby except the Ringo Kid. The Ringo Kid is looking at nothing but Dallas. Which brings us to moment number 2. The romance story begins. So far, only 2 major storylines have been established. 1, Indians are attacking, and 2, the revenge saga. It's this image of Dallas holding the baby. Look at the way the Ringo Kid swallows I mean, he's filled with emotion. And you can see that Dallas is looking directly at the Ringo Kid, because the Ringo Kid, he is profoundly affected. And he begins to imagine this beautiful woman might make a great mother for his own children. Look at the Ringo Kid's smile. It's just barely, just a hint of a smile to Dallas. Now, I want you to take a look at this right here. This is just a very brief part of the movie, but look how beautifully lit with the shadows and the angles and Dallas entering into the light. A newly born angel. And Ringo checks, okay, nobody's looking, so I'm going to go after this girl. We get about 4 minutes of movie time that is dedicated just to building the relationship between Dallas and the Ringo Kid. So Dallas walks out into the moonlight, and he's not a stalker, okay? He's just curious. He wants to spend more time with Dallas and get to know her a little bit more. So they have a little bit of small talk. Here's a big revelation for all of us.
My father and brother were shot down by the plumber boys.
Here, Ringo is showing us that he has a responsibility to go in to Lordsburg and find the plumber boys to avenge the death of his father and brother.
I lost mine when I was a kid. It was a massacre on Superstition Mountain.
Here we get a bit of information that helps explain more about Dallas's background. But moreover, what we get here is greater sympathy for Dallas. If she grew up without her parents, then we can begin to understand her a little bit better. They're trying to be cool and dismissive about it.
Well, you gotta live no matter what happens.
Yeah, that's it.
Note that you've got to live no matter what happens, and Ringo agreeing, echoes the lunch scene before, where they both say,
Things happen.
Yeah, that's it. Things happen.
Things happen. So what we're seeing here in this scene is two people sharing experience. This is the second time that we've found them in agreement on fate and life. A cowboy and a beautiful woman here bathed in the moonlight. There's no lust, no kissing, no romance at all here. Just two people connecting in a natural way. What follows here is a beautiful moment where possibilities get planned into realities. Ringo is young and innocent. Dallas is not innocent at all, but she has proven herself to be an extremely kind person. And Ringo doesn't know how to propose marriage. You know, cowboys aren't exactly the type to get down on one knee and say, "Will you marry me?" Ringo's marriage proposal is very indirect, but it's not awkward at all. It's very beautifully done. Look at the way he looks at her and looks away just a little bit.
You look, well,
And she realizes, look at the tears in her eyes. She realizes, oh my God. And then comes the line,
a man could live there. And a woman.
he presses her to say yes. And then there's this beautiful moment where she says, "You don't know me." And he says, "Yeah, I know all I want to know. I know all I need to know." "Oh, don't talk like that." And then she runs away. Why does she run away? Well, Dallas can't believe that anyone would want to marry her. She feels like a bad girl, unworthy of something as wonderful as marriage. She has turned to Doc before for help or advice, so it seems kind of natural that she calls to Doc.
Ringo asked me to marry him.
Oh, wow.
Is that wrong for a girl like me?
Is that wrong for a girl like me? Well, this brings us to point number 3, Dallas's conflict. Actually, there are 2 decisions that she's going to have to make and challenges to face. First, there's this question, the moral question of, is it okay, after the life that I have led, the sins that I have committed, is it wrong for me to have a man like Ringo? And Doc is going to tell her straight up.
Who am I to tell you what's right or wrong?
This is my favorite line in the movie. Who am I to tell you what's right and wrong? I'm not a moral man. I'm just a man. So she's gotten permission from Doc, who she looks to as a father figure, and believes that he has enough moral authority to approve the marriage. Next, Ringo is back to press her for an answer about marriage.
You didn't answer what I asked you last night.
She's already decided. Doc Boone has already given permission. But still she has this internal conflict. She knows that if they go to Lordsburg together, he's going to find out that she was a prostitute. And to make it worse, in Lordsburg, Ringo is either going to go to jail or get killed. So she decides, I'm going to help you escape. And he says, no, I got to go to Lordsburg. She says, the odds are not in your favor. And Ringo says a line that really defines what honor and duty and responsibility are all about. He says, well, there's some things a man just can't run away from. This is what it is to be a man. You don't run from your responsibility. This idea lies at the heart of the cowboy hero of the great Western films in American cinema. And this line, as good as it is not the line that is attributed to John Wayne in this movie. Actually, if you do a quick Google search of John Wayne cowboy character quotes, you're going to find a variation of this. It's not, well, there's some things a man just can't run away from, but instead, a man's got to do what a man's got to do. That's the common quote that we find today. However, John Wayne never actually said this in any of his movies, but this quote has followed him through history, and I'm certain that the quote is based on this line, well, there's some things a man just can't run away from in Stagecoach. So, these scenes with Dallas and Doc and Dallas and Ringo make clear to the audience what important conflicts she's feeling. Speaking of Doc, that brings us to our final point 4, Doc's redemption. In the first part of the movie, Doc is a delightfully comedic character. His interaction with Peacock, his drunken foolishness, he's so much fun. Hatfield and Doc don't like each other very much. Remember how Hatfield called him a drunken beast? Well, after the baby is delivered safely, look at how Hatfield has changed his opinion about Doc. Hatfield, along with the others here, crowd around Doc to congratulate him for doing such a great job. Mr. Peacock shakes his hand and addresses him as
Dr. Boone.
Curly pats him on the back, and Hatfield and Buck look on with respect at Doc Boone. In the morning, Hatfield supports Doc Boone's decision to let Mrs. Mallory rest another day, not just once,
I refuse to allow Mrs. Mallory to travel until she and the child are out of danger.
but twice.
And I demand respect for his professional opinion.
Hatfield.
And as much as Doc likes his whiskey, he would rather throw it in the fire than to drink with Gatewood. Now he's got too much self-respect for that. With these actions, we see the beginning of Doc's redemption. He was a social outcast, but now he has proven himself. In addition to his very moving scene with Dallas, where he says he's not qualified to tell her what's right, there's a brief scene in this segment where the new Doc kindly tells Ringo that Dallas is in the kitchen. But before Ringo leaves, Doc asks him,
How old were you when you went to the pen?
and Ringo replies that he was going on 17, which means he was only 16 years old when he went to jail. And then the camera stays with Doc Boone as he takes in this information. The director clearly wants us to think about it too, about what this really means. The main purpose of this conversation is to make it clear to us that Ringo was too young to have had any romance in his life until this point. Doc Boone was played by Thomas Mitchell, who has gone down in film history as one of the greatest character actors ever. For his role as Doc Boone, Mitchell won the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor in 1940, the only cast member from Stagecoach to win. Most of the Oscars that year went to MGM's color epic Gone with the Wind. Another 1939 movie that got some nominations was Frank Capra's Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. Now, I'm mentioning these because Tom Mitchell appeared in both of these movies. He played Scarlett O'Hara's father in Gone with the Wind, and he played the funny drunk reporter in Mr. Smith Goes to Washington. In total, Tom Mitchell appeared in 5 movies in 1939, all of which were popular films. But that's not all about Thomas Mitchell. Not only did he win an Oscar for Stagecoach, he also went on to win a Tony Award for stage performance and an Emmy for TV acting. So Thomas Mitchell is one of only 9 actors in film history to win all 3 awards, an Oscar, a Tony, and an Emmy. The segment ends with the characters hurrying to escape from the Indians who are getting closer, and it leaves us with the feeling that some action scenes are coming soon. Okay, let's wrap it up. The middle 30 minutes of the Stagecoach, the Apache Wells segment, gives the audience some comedy, some drama, and more information about key characters. It also gives us some very beautiful music, lighting and framing, long shots and close-ups, and unites the often arguing Stagecoach members in a shared moment of peace. And it begins the romance story between Dallas and Ringo, the third plot of the movie. And it clearly establishes the social outcasts, Dallas, Ringo, and Doc, as the most sympathetic characters of the story.